The book of Acts 15:1. And certain men which came down from Judea taught the brethren, and said, except ye be circumcised after the manner of Moses, ye cannot be saved. So certain men which came from Judea taught the brethren. Let me tell y'all something about that word brethren. We're going to go to 2 verses. The book of Esther. Book of Esther 10. Again, the book of Esther 10, verse 3. Now I want you to pay attention. For Mordecai the Jew was next unto King Ahasuerus, and great among the Jews, and accepted of the multitude of his brethren. His brethren. Watch the next 2 verses. Pay attention to the next 2 verses. Seeking the wealth of his people and speaking peace to all his seed. Again, brothers and sisters, again, your brethren are your own people, your own seed. Brethren, your people, your seed. This is biblical. This is elementary. Ezekiel chapter 11. We're talking about brethren now. Ezekiel 11, verse 15. Son of man, thy brethren, even thy brethren, the men of thy kindred, and all the house of Israel holy, are they unto whom the inhabitants of Jerusalem have said, get ye far from the Lord. Unto us this land is given in possession. The 2 sides begin to quarrel. But what I wanted you to see was brethren was the men of your kindred. Brethren was the men of your kindred. Chapter and verse. See, people tried to mock me. Oh, your understanding is off, blah, blah, blah. But I prove things by chapter and verse. The book of Romans 9:4, once again. I go over these all the time because, the Christians, they act like they can't understand what we're reading. For I could wish that myself were accursed from Christ for my brethren. Here's that brethren again, my kinsmen. Like it says in Ezekiel 11, verse 15, Ezekiel 11, verse 15, your brethren was your kindred. Paul says the same thing Ezekiel said. Your brethren is your kinsmen, your own people. This is not some spiritual brethren between the nations, a brotherhood in Christ. No, that's crap. When it says brethren, it's the kinsmen. Your own people. That's why it says, my brethren, my kinsmen, according to the flesh, who are Israelites. So Paul's brethren and his kinsmen, according to the flesh, are Israelites. So when I go back to Acts 15, verse 1, and certain men which came down from Judea taught the brethren, which were other Jews. Their brethren would be their own people, their kinsmen. That is the biblical meaning of the word brethren. What you read, a white man, a black man, a Chinese man, or whatever man, is not brethren in Christ. That is not the biblical brethren. That is a brethren given by philosophy of Edom. Or I should say the philosophy of Edom. Him and his creative ways to deceive you. Your brethren, according to the text, is your own people. So what this verse is saying is there are uncircumcised Jews among the nations. This is what they don't want you to know. Because see, when you go to Acts 20, watch this. We're going to show you Acts 21. Acts 21. Verse 21, just getting to the point. It says, and they are informed of thee, talking about all, that thou teachest all the Jews which are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, saying that they ought not to circumcise their children. Because the Jews among the nations were the only ones being circumcised. Why? Because they were the uncircumcision among the Gentiles. While the Pharisee and Sadducee from Judea was teaching them we're talking to Jews that were in other lands, to get circumcised, like it says in Acts 15:1, they were accusing Paul of skipping that step, saying that they ought not to circumcise their children, neither walk after the customs. So we can see here clearly that the uncircumcision was also the Jews. The uncircumcision was also the Jews. This is what we're proving. So when we go to the book of Romans chapter 2, watch. We don't know where these Christians get what their beliefs from. Ignorant. Romans chapter 2, verse 25. For circumcision verily profiteth, if thou keep the law. But if thou be a breaker of the law, thy circumcision, which is of the flesh, is made uncircumcision of the heart. So your flesh is circumcised, but your heart is not. If you sin, your heart is not circumcised. This is what Paul is saying. The Christians don't want to read it like that. But watch this. Therefore, if the uncircumcision, who is this uncircumcision? Is it the other nations, or is this the uncircumcised Jew among the nations? You're going to see as we read. Therefore, if the uncircumcision keep the righteousness of the law, shall not his uncircumcision be counted for circumcision? Would this uncircumcised Jew in the flesh be counted for the circumcision of the heart if he keeps the law? If you keep the law, then your heart is circumcised. What are these Christians talking about? They don't keep the law, so their heart is not circumcised. The way they interpret these verses, brothers and sisters, is by white supremacy. We're telling you. But watch this. And shall not uncircumcision. Who are these uncircumcision? Are these the uncircumcised Jews or the other nations? You got to think. And shall not uncircumcision, which is by nature. Why? Because they were born in other lands serving their gods. That's the nature. If it fulfill the law, judge thee, who by the letter and circumcision doth transgress the law. Do these uncircumcised Jews, which is by nature, if they keep the law, be able to judge you, who by having your foreskin circumcised, with the letter, break it? That's right. Watch this next thing. Watch. For he is not a Jew, which is one outwardly. Notice it says Jew. Why? Because it was talking about the uncircumcised Jews among the nations. These Christians have come up with an interpretation for this. Oh, he is not a Jew, which is one outwardly. You idiot. These Christians. Of course, he was not a Jew that was one outwardly in the circumcision of the flesh. Paul's making a point. For he is not a Jew, which is one outwardly, a Jew, because he's talking about the uncircumcised Jews among the nations. This has nothing to do with you being a spiritual Jew, you idiots. Man, I hate to see them misinterpret a Bible verse like this. This is a good verse. He is not a Jew, which is one outwardly, neither is that circumcision, which is outward of the flesh. Why? But he is a Jew, which is one inwardly, the inward Jew. And circumcision is that of the heart. How was his heart circumcised? Therefore, if the uncircumcision, which is the uncircumcised Jew, keep the righteousness of the law, shall not his uncircumcision, which is of the heart, of the flesh, be counted for circumcision of the heart? The law circumcised the heart. The law circumcised, that's why it says, therefore, if the uncircumcision, which is the uncircumcised Jew, keep the righteousness of the law, shall not his uncircumcision, which is of the flesh, be counted for circumcision of the heart. That's what Paul is saying. So when we get down to verse 29, the inward Jew is the uncircumcised Jew that keeps the law. So his heart can be circumcised. It had nothing to do with his flesh.